This is both a review video and just a demonstration of how I like to paint. We tend to rush, we want to be efficient, we want to, get to the good stuff, but in painting, this is the good stuff. Slow down, pay attention, be present. Here in my studio, I'm in the thick of testing out this signature series of watercolor paints by Gallo. These are handmade paints from Italy, and I've been intrigued by trying them. I've been to Italy a couple of times to paint and picked up a set. You may have seen my previous review video of the Gallo colors, the lake set. And interestingly, didn't love those colors. I didn't realize when I bought the lake label that they were not as vibrant because they are plant-based watercolors. And so the formulation is just different than a pigment-based watercolor, and it's not reflective of the Gallo watercolors themselves. It's kind of a specialized thing. So after I posted that, Gallo contacted me and offered to send me their signature set to review. And I was eager to try it. I'd actually been on the site that day looking at the watercolors and thinking about what colors I would buy. I prefer tube paints to pans, although Gallo offers both tube and pan formulations, and it seems to me they have a little bit larger selection in their pan offerings, and so you can get these pans here as well. My preference is for tubes. I like the kind of option that I have then to add them to my own palettes and to fill and refill as needed. Now, something else you should probably know about me is I'm not really a watercolor set kind of person. I would so much rather have the freedom of choice of just choosing individual tubes, because I know that whenever you get a set, even though like this signature set, they've been chosen especially for flexibility in mixing, I tend to work with watercolor in a way that's individual to me. And so the colors I might prefer or lean towards using the most often might not show up in the signature set. And I'll probably end up with a few that I don't love. And you can tell by the chaos beside me here that I've been using them. And as a reviewer, whenever I do a review, which is rare, I like to really give you more than just my first impressions. So there's a number of things that go into choosing colors. It's certainly not just swatching them out. That's actually one reason I chose to squeeze just small amounts of the pigments into this pan here, rather than putting them into a palette, because in this pan, I can actually see them interact and get an idea of some of the different ways the colors mix together. I can also see how they separate and granulate as they dry, and that's something I'm very interested in. I love watercolors that do that kind of interesting pigmentation. And so I'm always paying attention to what's happening in my palette so I can have some idea of how these paints are going to flow, how they're going to mix together, and how they're going to look when they're dried. My favorite of the colors so far has to be the Notturno color. This Nocturne color is really quite beautiful. It's a deep smoky blue violet, and it has that separation and pigmentation. I'm going to show that to you today. And I had a color that kind of came out of nowhere, a color that I thought I wasn't going to be into, that I ended up being surprised by. So I want to show you that as well. I'm also not super happy with some of the samples that I've painted so far. I really think there's a struggle as an artist who's intuitive. I like to paint, letting the paint kind of lead the way. And anytime you're choosing new colors, and anytime there's that pressure of let's paint something pretty so everyone will see how beautiful these colors are, it's really easy to get into kind of a messy little hole of trying to show these colors, doing everything and use all the colors, and it just kind of turns into a hot mess. So we want to take our time. I'm going to show you a few of these pigments today. One thing I can say regarding all of these colors is they are all heavily pigmented. They're much richer in color than the lake set that I tried that was plant derived. So I just want to point that out and just assure you of the quality of these pigments. Any struggles I have today as I invite flow on the paper, they're going to come from me, the artist. Hopefully my intuition can just be active and engaged today in my painting process and give these paints, just show them to their best ability. So I mentioned that one of these colors surprised me, and that was the pyrro orange. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. So in the Gallo leaflet that I got, which has all their colors, it tells you their light fastness quality, transparency, opacity, whether it's staining or non-staining, whether it granulates or not. All of that is kind of in the little information down below here. It also tells you if it's available in pans or tubes or both. I'm intrigued by, some of the colors that I'm seeing here that I don't have. The olive green deep looks like it may separate as it dries. It's also made up of multiple pigments. It gives you the pigment numbers as well. And so that's going to influence how it flows. The logwood violet, I believe, is the lake series. And you can see it's right beside the Noterno color here. And I found the logwood violet to be relatively dark, but the lake color I would say would actually be darker. And so I don't know that this actually shows that accurately, but it does give you information about each of those hues. We also see that logwood violet, just like most lake colors, is rated as having poor light fastness. That's a 3 on their scale, whereas the Noterno is rated at their highest level of light fastness, which is 8. It's just helpful to be able to pay attention to these catalogs and use them for what they're intended for, to give you a little bit of background information before you start using a color, or to help you choose a color when you're shopping. The pyrro orange is the one that surprised me, and I just want to point out that it is a color that's marked as semi-opaque, and that's generally I tend to prefer transparent colors for the bulk of my painting, and I use more opaque colors as kind of little pops of highlights later on in the painting process. Most of the time, a color with some opacity or a lot of opacity doesn't always mix really nicely. It tends to want to be a bit muddy. So I kind of was steering clear of the pyrro orange simply for those reasons. But I'm going to just squeeze a little extra out today so we have a little more fresh color there. And I want to show you what it does because I was kind of surprised, like I said, by how pretty it was. Let's get this brush wet and actually do some testing out. So here's the pyrro orange, pretty close to full saturation with a juicy kind of mop style brush. But I want to just open it up. I love using the spray bottle to get the color moving on the page because it's less about my brush dragging it around and forcing it to do things. It really starts to take advantage of the physics of watercolor and follow the fluidity. So we're going to see those colors chase the water across the page, and we're going to see the orange change as it dilutes. And in watercolor, you know, we don't use white for lightening a color. We use water because the white of the paper is our white. It's where our light comes from. So we get the beautiful luminosity of watercolor when we let the colors flow transparently across the page. And I was surprised by how soft this beautiful kind of coral orange became as I diluted it. And I think that was what really got me excited about working with this color, is just how delicate it started to appear. I've seen a lot of oranges in my palette that are harsher than that, but this one has some softness. It's a warm color, but it also feels like it has a little bit of coolness to it. It's a little bit pinkier. And so let's just let it continue to flow. We're just filling the page with a wash of orange. And if I were to do this with each color, this would become the most expensive review of all time because, of course, we'd have multiple sheets of beautiful paper covered in individual colors. But we don't want to just see what a color does all by itself. I want to introduce you to this color in company. Let's see it do some other things with other colors. And I think for my intuitive process, this idea of dropping in color and letting it move, it's such a good way of kind of sparking imagination, just engaging with the paint, being present in the moment. Watercolor can be so meditative and beautiful. And I think here on YouTube, it's easy to feel like there's an urgency. Get to the interesting part of the painting before people click away. But this meditative process of just dropping in paint, watching it move, and really noticing what it does, it's deeply valuable for your insight as a painter, for your intuition, for your mental health, for all of those things. We tend to rush, we want to be efficient, we want to get to the good stuff, but in painting, this is the good stuff. Slow down, pay attention, be present. Notice. Observation is a huge part of watercolor. Now I mentioned I love the Noterno color, so we're going to pull that one out as well today. And I'm just going to kind of squeeze a little refresher on the little knob of color there. And so I've got a little sticky dry Noterno and a little bit of fresh. And I'm going to touch it in. Let's put it over here. We know it's Noterno gives us a hint as to a good way to use it as a shadow color. So I'm just using a kind of dry-ish brush. I would call it a neutral brush. It's adding pigment to the paper, but it's not flooding it with water. And so we're placing it on wet paper. It's going to kind of sit in place really softly. And yet you can see it's not moving a lot, just kind of staying in one place. And we're going to encourage it to move in a minute, but I wanted to get it down on the page first with a little bit of kind of control. And I'm just kind of following this shape. And with intuitive painting, a really good way of planning or building an intuitive painting is not changing anything too rapidly. So I'm adding something, but I'm kind of working with what's already on the page. So I've got a shape on the page, and I'm kind of following that shape with a new color. So I'm doing something new color, but I'm also doing something relatively familiar, following an existing shape. That helps me stay in kind of on task, on brand, on theme. And I'm kind of thinking circular because I was in my garden. My daughter brought me some flowers this week and lots of dahlias and zinnias, rounded flowers with multiple petals. So I'm kind of imagining a little zinnia-esque feeling here as I place the Naterno on the page. As I've picked up work down here, you can see that there's a puddle of liquid here at the bottom. I've got my painting board tilted, my block. And so excess moisture is always flowing down using gravity. Again, more physics of watercolor. And so if I add water like I'm doing now, that's going to also flow downward. Let's open this up a little bit and kind of unite these two colors. So I just spritzed into here so the water would flow from the pyrrole orange down across the Naterno and down the page a little bit. And off and on, I like to just kind of use a paper towel or a soft cloth and blot up excess moisture that's migrated to the bottom and kind of pooled there. So we'll let those colors kind of be present on the page and maybe bring in something else. I think a soft blue-green would look really lovely with the coral orange. And I've got this mixture here. I've got the ultramarine turquoise, which I quite like. There's a spring green, and then over here we've got the indanthrone blue. And so with those mixtures, I could add a little bit of yellow, and that's their azo yellow. And I could also pull in some of my orange. And the orange mixing with a color that has a lot of blue in it is going to kind of make it a bit neutralized. The complements of blue and orange kind of working to combine to make a neutral. So we're just making here this lovely kind of neutral puddle. And I know that's not telling you about those individual colors and their properties in this kind of review video, but it is telling you how they mix. And I think with watercolor, how colors mix is a really big part of my painting practice. I love colors that love to work together, and I love looking for ways to use them. We could bring a little more of the spring green in, just as a pop of light. I'm just noticing how I'm using all these dahlia petal kind of strokes, just short little stuttery hash strokes to kind of fill the page. I think that's kind of interesting. I'm just channeling dahlias in all my movements. And if I feel like I'm getting repetitious with the shape, changing a brush is a good way to kind of shake things up a little bit. Back to some pure orange. See if I can't add a little bit of zoomy color, exciting color. And I'm working on wet paper. It's drying very slowly because I continue to add fluidity to all of these different areas. This corner is probably pretty dry, so I'm mindful of that. And if I go to paint over there, I'm either going to use a wet on dry approach or I'll moisten the paper so that I have some movement, fluidity, and some soft blending in that area. I'm going to turn the page and just see how I feel about looking at it from another angle. How does it feel if you turn the page? Does it feel balanced? These are good things to think about as you build those early shapes in your painting. If you're working like I am today with soft, large shapes and wanting to build some structure for a design, turning the page to see how it works from different angles might give you fresh ideas for the painting. And it might also just help you to understand how the different elements are working together, kind of abstracts it in your brain. Join the Heart-Led Artist Journey for monthly lessons that will help you develop your own heart-prioritizing artistic style. I want to just point out how soft this violet is. The Naturno color is so easy to use because it doesn't really require any pre-mixing. You don't have to add another color to tone it down. Some colors, some violets especially, are so intense, it just reads purple, purple, purple on the page. And so it just feels like a color that will work, will accommodate other colors. It supports a more vibrant color by being kind of neutral to begin with. And I'm going to grab my large handmade Levinson brush. This brush is just a wonderful kind of juicy large stroke brush to use. I'm going to bring in some more greens. Let's really get the feeling of foliage and leaves and flowers. Remember how I mentioned that this corner, it used to be up there, is quite dry. And so you can see as I place this Levinson brush's strokes, I love the way the comb-like marks it creates that look so effortless. I don't know, they look like they just kind of fell there like tree branches. And I'm going to grab a little bit of the Naturno with my green on the brush already and drop that in so we get some more shadows. And then I might bring in some fluidity, soften around the edges so that those crisp edges stay over here and they support that little flower shape. And turning the page again, so I can see how that effect works. And I can also decide, do I want to bring that shape, that kind of brushwork into another part of the painting? Everywhere else is wet right now, so that might be just making a mental note. Once this paper is drier, and once it's started to tighten up and flatten out as it dries, I will know that it's more ready for line work, mark making, and be able to bring more line work into other parts of the painting that will kind of mirror or echo what's happening up here. It's not a bad thing to do some line work onto wet paper. Sometimes you'll get some really beautiful effects that way. And also this brush can be kind of shaped a little bit, so I can get a fine point and a large, strong stroke as well. And I actually think I'm going to soften this even further. And the reason I'm doing that is because this looks so velvety and rich. I've got this lovely blending of these muted, cool colors that make this look like a pop of vibrant color. And I think if I soften this, I can still put line work over top. It's quite light in value, but I can also have that same kind of velvety effect up in this corner. So we'll give it a little bit of time to just let those colors soak into the page and slowly start to dry. One thing I think is unfamiliar to me as I work with this beautiful orange that I really fell in love with is thinking about how now do I work with this orange in other ways? Because the orange is so vibrant, can I make a darker kind of shadow version of that orange for where the petals are in shadow? So I'm kind of holding that in my brain, thinking about how I'm going to do that. Not sure yet. I'm just going to let it kind of be a consideration for as the painting develops. How do I get some shadow shapes into the painting? Spattering a little bit of the spring green, just thinking about maybe bringing a pop of color. I'm also wondering about bringing a little bit of sunlight. Will this yellow, the azo yellow, create some sunlight if I drop it into a couple spots on the page? So up here where the colors are a bit lighter, spritz it a little bit to blend it. And I'm working on 100% cotton paper. I didn't mention that earlier. This is the Bahong brand, but it is 100% cotton, so it is very forgiving. It's a lot like painting on fabric. It gets damp, but it also holds the water in a beautiful way. It flows in a beautiful way. You get just some real engagement with the paint. So if I mix the orange with my reds over here, I've got an alizarin crimson and I've got a quinacridone magenta. That's giving me a bit more of a soft, deep red. So I could try adding that into the painting. It's still too moist over here. So it might become something to bring into the next layer. I feel like this is a really nice foundational shape that I can perhaps come back to and build some depth. So I did just quickly squiggle with the brush, create an edge over here. I like the way I've got a soft red edge here where the paper is damp. Then I've got my squiggles with the green. That's giving me a crisp edge, but it's changing up the colors. And then that kind of continues I've changed the color, but now I've got an edge with the red. And so I'm just following, guiding the eye around the page is what I should be saying. So I've got this design then, the curve of the flower, but it's being depicted in 3 different ways. In the negative painting of the greens, in the softness of the reds up here, and in the crisp line of this red down here. And that's a great design tool to think about having maybe 3 different ways to do the same thing. How do I show the shape of something, both with softness, with crispness, and with negative painting? And if you can do those 3 different things, you're bringing something really interesting into your painting. While I'm waiting for this to dry, I can maybe add a little bit more rich color. This feels like a secondary flower over here, so maybe we add a little bit of depth with our orange there as well. And I kept it simple. This is our star of the show, so I just squiggled a line that could be the edge of the flower. A little bit of softness in the center, and let's go the little bit of dark red in the center as well. And that's the pyrro and the reds mixed together. And a little spritz of water. In the next stage, we're going to let this dry completely. This is both a review video and just a demonstration of how I like to paint. This being a wet and wet process, we're going to go to stage 2 of building up some depth. And I'm going to show you how I do that seamlessly so that you can't tell what was painted in layer 1 and what was painted in layer 2. And anytime I stand here and tell you what I'm going to do next, my brain is already thinking about things I could be doing right now. One of those is taking some of this yellow that's up here and bringing it down the page, just to have some color harmony, some rhythm with the color, where we get that consistency, feeling like the painting is telling the same story. So we're going to just press in, rub in a little bit of yellow into this background area. I'm going to spritz it. I'm really tilting my angle because I want these yellows to dilute and spread into the paper. And when I tilted, did you notice that big drop of water that came down, flushed right across from my second flower here? I'm actually really excited about that. We want that. It felt like it could be a problem, an accident, but it also felt like it could create some connection and also loosen up some of my intentionality. Sometimes my little determined hand and brain and body make all of these decisions in the painting, and we take ourselves a little bit too seriously, and it starts to feel heavy-handed. When you're so focused on doing everything right, it's really, really helpful for your painting to have some areas of letting go. And when that happens, it's kind of like having a sense of humor. You can laugh at yourself a little bit. You can make room for the unexpected and work with it. So I've brought in a whole bunch of yellow. I've let that water flush across this flower, and we can restore that in the second layer. Right now, I'm going to walk away, stop fussing. Once this is dry, we'll also have the opportunity to look at how some of these colors granulate and create some textural effects. As I've been testing these Gallo colors, I hope that you're excited about them as well. If you would like to try them yourself, I have a coupon code for these that Gallo has provided to me. You can find that in the description below the video, and you can place your order and give them a try. These Italian handmade watercolors are really beautiful. I love that they're made using gum arabic from acacia trees, rosemary oil, and local honey to create their signature binder. The feeling of them, the way they reactivate with my wet brush is just really beautiful. It's still a little damp. There's a ripple here that I can see hasn't quite flattened out, and so I know there is still some dampness here. But I just want to point out how beautiful this is. There's some really gorgeous texture here, and the Bahong paper has a really interesting texture. Sometimes I feel like it almost looks like sandpaper, and just the kind of graininess on the surface. And that really will show off the texture of granulating pigments in a beautiful way. And with this set from Gallo, the ultramarine turquoise, the notturno, these are colors that granulate beautifully. So we're seeing that showing up on the page, and I'm just excited about it. Here for it. I'm going to step away from the Gallo watercolors for a minute because I want to add some line. I've got some water-soluble crayons. These are Stabilo Woodies. I also have the Neocolor crayons, but I think for this color from Stabilo will be really kind of nice to use. And I'm just going to do a little bit of scribbling right on the page. Oh yeah, it's blending right in. So that's okay. A color that blends in actually can be really fun to add to the page because it feels like you can kind of fool around. It's a good way to loosen up without feeling like you're going to wreck the painting. So I'm just kind of giving myself a bit of a flower shape. You can really see it there. And it's the most childlike, playful little flower shape. And that's been something I've enjoyed doing in my paintings because when you get a little bit silly, it's very freeing. And it also feels like when I do these childlike silly marks and then, ooh, something bold, this turquoise one, and then keep painting and it works, and the painting turns out, it's very empowering. And so I think that's one of the biggest arguments for taking risks into your paintings is just the fact that you will develop strategies to make the painting work. Not always the first time, but as you bring this experimentation into your painting practice, and you will start to feel like no matter what's happening on the paper, you can redeem what you've done and make it work in some way. It might not be what you expected early on, but you can make a beautiful painting even when you've done something inadvertent that turned it into a hot mess. Really good reasons to experiment. So I've got the scribble marks. I'm going to add some richness, and this is a stage of painting where I'm defining shape. I'm going to just follow, first of all, my lead from just a moment ago with the water-soluble crayons and bring in some of that same line work, this time using just a round brush. There, layers of petals, just that easy, a little bit silly, trusting the process, a little bit of the magenta here. And I think what we do often is at this stage of the painting, when you go to develop and start to define and create depth and want to add some shape, we tend to get more hesitant. You know, I can do a lot of fun things, layering color with boldness when I have that wet and wet softness going for me. Once the paper's dry and I start to want to create depth and shape, it's very easy to start holding back. And I think the painting, the freshness that we started with then gets covered up. It gets buried under control and a little bit of anxiety. So again, good reasons to be a little bit bold. So I'm just choosing to work a little dry brush right now, straight into the Noterno, maybe a little bit of that turquoise here, ultramarine turquoise. Let's bring some of that color down here as well. And then I can soften slightly. I'm going to try to keep from wetting the entire page. Sometimes I do, and it just slows down the process because, of course, I'm then working a second layer wet and wet, and it's going to limit my ability to create crisp edges and do some of that line work that I like. So at this stage, we're doing a little bit of both, and I wanted to show you how I can make that second layer blend into the first. And I've kind of gone into bold strokes. And what's happening then is that we're seeing a combination of crispness and the softness layering together. And it's working because I haven't changed up my colors big time. In fact, I'm just using the tip of my brush. I'm thinking, what if I suggested some flower petals over here with the Noterno color? Just a little bit. I'm going to soften that as a tad there and there. Add a little spatter with the pyrro orange. That's really pretty. There's the turquoise that I used with the crayon, and then there's the pyrro orange, and they play off of each other really nicely. Bring some of that turquoise down here too. One thing I like to do when I'm painting is sometimes when I'm painting more loosely like this, you can create a shape. This one's kind of a squashy rectangle. Put a line through it, that makes it a leaf. If I say it's a leaf, it becomes a leaf because I said so, because I'm the artist and I get to decide. And as a painter, it can be really fun to play the name game, to put a mark down and say, okay, that's a leaf, that's a shadow, that's flower, because I said it is. And when we name things like that, it's very interesting how it just works. We see that element come to life because we said that squashy rectangle. Now I've actually filled it in with a tiny bit of green, so now it really is a leaf. Little spatter, little shadow. And actually I can take this green that I was working with here, I've put it down here a little bit. I can maybe use a little bit of of it down here to also just draw the eye down the page and create some color unity, and just continuing to kind of trace around some of those different elements. I want to just go back to what I said earlier regarding, working with brand new colors. It's a learning process. And when you find that little spark of excitement, the thing that makes the painting feel like it's going to work. For me, it was this pyrro orange. I avoided those colors in my first few tests of this pigment because I don't usually paint with such a vivid looking orange or a opaque looking orange. I tend to choose a transparent orange. I often choose yellow oranges or rusts, and this didn't feel like any of those things. But as soon as I saw it diluted, I just got a spark of kind of excitement, thinking, oh, maybe I can use this. There's a way I can bring this into my painting. And the spark of excitement that I feel that I like to chase in my kind of intuitive style of painting generally comes from being willing to break my patterns, break my habits, and do something that's a little different for me. So it happened with the pyrro orange. It happened when I added this pop of turquoise that really contrasted with those oranges. So it's the unpredictable, the unexpected. They energize a painting. For me as an artist, it reminds me that I'm free. It lets me know that there is beauty in mistakes, that I don't have to do everything right or everything I'd planned to do to see my painting work. I can actually discover new outcomes with this kind of openness to process and willingness to play, changing up what's expected. A little bit of yellow spatter, just bringing some of that light back. Mostly the yellow that I used, it's glowing up through some of these darks, like the liveliness it gives. So if you're struggling in your painting practice today, it might just be that a fresh color will liven up your painting practice and give you something new to think about, give you something exciting to explore. It might be that a color that you've been avoiding in your palette could be the key to some kind of little breakthrough that expands your watercolor style. So often the colors we choose speak for us as artists. When I use color consistently, that's often the first thing people recognize when they see my paintings is they'll see the colors I've chosen and go, oh, that looks like an Angela painting. And that happens because I tend to work really consistently. There's things I know about these colors that I can count on. But when I try something new, it brings a new dimension to my painting practice. And that feels very freeing, like there's always a new kind of discovery to make around the corner. And then you build into it with what you already have, all the skills and understandings that you have, so that you're always just kind of adding new skills to the toolbox, so you have a broader and more robust, more resilient watercolor style. I really like the liveliness in this painting. I want to point out some compositional details. If you're trying to create your own paintings and thinking about design, you might be wondering, Angela, you've only painted 2 flowers. I thought you were always supposed to paint odd numbers. And I want to just point out how the eye travels through the painting based on kind of my understanding of what I'm looking at right now. Design is always subjective. Viewers navigate a painting in different ways. We have a number of different things going on here. We have dark and light contrasts, and those dark and light contrasts are moving the eye up through the painting, kind of following this path of yellow. There's a little pop of yellow here that's also kind of guiding in terms of value. And there's actually a light area over here that can also kind of serve as a light value contrast in this painting that also has a lot of strong darks. The darks are hitting here, here, over here, and here. This could be considered almost as one. In fact, let's tweak it so that it does kind of feel like a continuous shape. So we've got our dark here. Let's just pop a little bit of dark in here too, so that it kind of curves. And then this dark is already here. And so we have a dark pattern moving in this kind of shape here. And it actually is like a broken line here, dark here, bringing us across to here and anchoring us also to the bottom of the page. So we have these darks that kind of move us through the scene. And then the biggest point of interest is a color contrast. It's a pop of hot color with our big red flowers, our orangey flowers. And there's just 2 of them, but I feel like they're actually balanced quite well by this strong yellow shape down here. In terms of that, then we have almost a trio of shapes, an odd number. Even though we just have the 2 flowers, they're being balanced by their placement. This one's actually cut off, and by the kind of pop of contrast that's happening with this warm shape here as well. And so there's a lot of different elements that are going on in design. I've also used design in my use of the water-soluble crayon. My pops of turquoise I really leaned into because they can serve as anchors in the painting as well. So there's a strong turquoise here. It's more subtle here, but there's some turquoise line work that leads us up, follows the contour of the flower, actually dives us right into the center of the flower. Look at how that little swipe of turquoise actually did even more to bring us to the center of the flower. Pops of turquoise here, so we're just navigating around this circular shape. And then we see lines in turquoise over here, and even though everything's scribbly and very loose, it's still serving to do the job. And so we have, again, some turquoise down here. So all of these different things, and I could probably point out more. I haven't even talked about the patterns in the spatter and the placement of the spatter in terms of guiding the eye around the painting. But all of those things, even though they happened really kind of rapidly, intuitively I'm working to seek some movement and balance through the painting. And I'm using these different tools to do it. Because I've been painting for so long, I've trained my brain to think this way. And it's something I teach in my online classes. When I talk about design, it's actually my passion because design is going to give you the ability to compose your own paintings. It's going to give you the confidence to arrange the elements in your paintings, to edit your paintings for greater impact, and to work with kind of this intuitive responsiveness because you know that what you've learned about design, the things you know about warm and cool color, the things you know about light and dark contrast, the things you know about hard and soft edges and line work, all of these things are happening instinctively. Your mind, your instinctive artist's heart wants to create a painting that has energy and balance. And so you use the tools at your disposal. And that's why we play with color. That's why we play with tools. That's why we play with mark making and edges and learn these watercolor techniques to really be able to communicate with as much impact as we're able to create, to tell the story we want to create as artists. As I'm looking at this and seeing how strong and dark this is and how strong and dark this is, I feel like a little bit more strong and dark right here will also really create just a little bit more balance in this painting. Just fooling around with it a little bit more, carving into it with the crayon. Playful, connected, instinctive, and trusting. I want to thank Gallo again for letting me try these watercolors. The signature set is, like I said, really quite beautiful. I was beautifully surprised by the colors that I was drawn to and just how easy they were to work with and get those rich saturations of color. If you'd like to try Gallo watercolors, don't forget to use my discount code. It's in the description below the video. I'd love to hear what you think and which colors are your favorite. If you enjoyed the demo and you've been really thinking about design and composing your own paintings intuitively, I hope you'll stay connected with me. I've got weekly emails that I send out designed to encourage artists and help you grow in your own expression and style. And I offer courses designed to help artists with mindset and with personal skill development. Take a look at the description below the video or visit my website, heartledartist.com, where you can find out more about becoming a heart prioritizing artist who really lets your style shine through. You deserve to be your own favorite artist, and letting your heart speak into your art is the best way to do that. Thanks for watching.